My name is Duncan Webb. I am a management consultant to people who build and operate theaters. I've spent the last 22 years roaming around the country, writing feasibility studies, business plans, and strategic plans just about these buildings. I did it in two other practices and started my own practice in '97. I start Project 251 on Friday in Keene, New Hampshire. I've been thinking and worrying a lot about these issues for some time, and in fact, in 2007, we did something like this ourselves. We grabbed and hauled 40 facility managers from around North America to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in the Lower East Side of New York to talk about what we called it the Performing Arts Center of 2032. What are these buildings going to look like in 25 years? What are audiences going to look like? What are the users and the art forms going to look like? How are the funding streams changing? And therefore, how should the buildings be different? We talked a lot about audiences within that, and I'll focus on that. These number of sort of disturbing, challenging trends, declining participation, for one, and more importantly on the part of younger audiences, the demand for more stimulation on the part of arts audiences, the shortened planning horizons of contemporary consumers, and the one that I've become quite preoccupied with, the passive audience, and really the work of Lynn Connor. I'm sure some of you are aware of her work on what she calls the sacralization of audiences, and thinking about how early audiences, Greek, Roman, Asian, Elizabethan audiences, were very different than contemporary audiences. They were very active, they were very engaged, they were in the hall, they were yelling at the actors and warning them about the guy sneaking up behind them, they were arguing about the plot together, they were throwing things and jostling, and very much engaged in the performance. Whereas today, it's very different. We arrive at the hall, we come through the door, we line up, we wait our turn, we come in, we sit down, face the front, turn everything off, be quiet, pay attention. I often imagine there's somebody behind me with a ruler about to smack me if I'm not behaving. So it's a very different experience today, and the cultural norms have moved us to this place which younger audiences just aren't buying. And I want to draw the distinction. To me, it's not about enabling multitasking. We live in a world where consumers are in control of their experiences, and in the hall, we've taken that control away. So what we have to do is provide audiences the opportunity to take some control back of their experience as consumers of art. We also talked about new technologies, the role of education, the role of active arts participation, and the shift in these buildings, which we call the shift from Friday night lights to the community living room. A generation ago, these buildings, the lights came on at 7 o'clock on Friday night, and the fancy people wearing fancy clothes came to the fancy performance. Now the idea of these buildings has to be that they're open and active all the time. We talked a lot about how excited we are about the prospect of recycling buildings, not just to get our LEED Gold rating, but because, as we heard this morning, the idea of connecting the past and the future in the physical space. And my favorite line from the conference, Robert Long, who's a good North Carolina boy, said, "Chapel Hill doesn't need a performing arts center. Chapel Hill needs to be a performing arts center." So we concluded that it's still a good idea, that the sort of primal experience of storytelling around a fire is still why the place makes sense, but that major changes are necessary. Earlier this year, Alan Brown and I were invited to go to a university to help them reconceive their performing arts center. They're replacing an old one with a new one. We had a great 2 days there. We worked with staff, faculty, students, artists, leaders of the university, developing early principles for a new center. We talked about these issues I've just described and how new facilities should reflect and respond to these challenges. We imagined a center with formal and informal programming outside the building, public spaces always open and always active with extensive food and beverage service. We conceived a secondary performance space, small and flexible and accessible with a broad range of creative activity. And in the main hall, we imagined a space that would allow audiences to engage in different ways and to different levels. Stools, benches, couches, walk-around space, and other means that would give audiences that sense of some control of their experience. It was all going very well until the end of the second day when we got together, made a presentation to the funders. that group of community leaders who were to be expected to open their checkbooks for the project. What do you mean it's going to be different? I liked it the way it was. Are you suggesting that there might be people walking around while the performance is underway? That seems very rude. Can I get my old subscription seats back? We like to go on Tuesday nights. The point of this ramble is that it's all fun and quite easy for us to imagine together, but the change is difficult, particularly among those who've done quite well with the way things are today. It's not enough for us to paint a warm and fuzzy picture of a different place for a different future. We have to be absolutely clear about the risks of not changing. Or as a fellow in Michigan said to me last week in reference to his 2,000-seat fixed-form auditorium on the campus of a major art center, if we're not obsolete now, we certainly will be in 10 years. So, be careful of the architects who use the word iconic a bit too often. Be very careful of the theater consultants and their constant reference to the sacred geometry of the performance space. Listen to artists, listen to audiences, listen to your community, and have the courage to challenge your funders. Thank you.